Okay, looks like we are live, and looks like everything is hopefully working out okay here. Just a quick reminder, if you are going to be asking questions, please use the @WeTheGoverned, as I do in this question right here, and or comment, I should say, down below, but use the @WeTheGoverned just so that I can actually see your questions. For those of you who are new to the show, in case there are some new people, we had a bunch of likes on this live stream even before we launched it here today. So I'm not sure if that means there's going to be a bunch of new people coming on, or just a lot of people were getting tired of enjoying the summer weather. But we are back to our regular Tuesday schedule. I do believe that for those of you who do watch this on a regular basis, we are going to be next week, I believe I'm going to be shifting to Wednesday, and it has more to do with just some video setup that I have here at the studio and what I'm going to be doing some of that work next week. So we'll probably be on a different day next week. Sorry to throw you off again once, as always, but that's just the way it's going on for the summer. Now, one of the other things I was going to mention is that oftentimes I've tried to historically tell people the events that I'm going to be speaking at over the next few weeks, and I don't have anything officially on the schedule right now, but inevitably I'm already starting to fill up some September and October dates, so I think I'll wait another week or so before I kind of get back into these and just let you know what those schedules are coming up here. I know I have something out in Port Townsend coming up in October, and there's a number of other things that are on the schedule. I know I'm speaking to the Thurston County Women's Republican Club coming up. I can't remember exactly when that is on my calendar right now, but I'll bring kind of a list in with me so that I can give you detail if you want to see me in person and come and ask those questions that you may be afraid to ask on this channel in the live stream, and instead you want to ask it in person. I always like those people asking questions like that, and always appreciate that as well. So just for a quick overview, some of the topics I do think that we should talk about today, if possible, would be things like this whole conversation about this judge out of Seattle who has decided to play God and imagine that she can see into your soul and identify whether you're on your faith journey adequately enough for her to consider you a true Christian or not. And this is, of course, in regards to Seattle public employees who work for the city of Seattle, and whether or not they were going to get their COVID-19 booster shot or whatever. And it's a completely absurd ruling by a completely and totally corrupt judge who really just has no excuse for wearing a black robe and pretending like that she should be there. But boy, does it ever open the door to a fascinating litigation against the judiciary for just their insane approach in Washington state, and just this out of control approach to how they've been making rulings lately. And she does seem to be one of the more recent cases that's certainly worth looking at. The other thing I thought I would mention, wouldn't be a bad topic to go over today, is if you were looking at the decision, the Trump administration has been signing a variety of executive orders, but one of the more significant ones recently is the one that is basically calling attention to the failures of the homeless industrial complex in Washington state and elsewhere. We just happen to be top of mind, and I've got it on good authority that part of the reason why he went down that road, signed that executive order when he did, was because of the work of Jonathan Cho and others in the Seattle area exposing the true corruption and moral failures in every way of the homeless industrial complex, and how they essentially act like grant grifting operations, extracting tax dollars in whatever capacity they get with no accountability or auditing or verification or metrics or anything that matter, and essentially ensuring that the more money they get, the worse the drug addiction problem becomes in our state, and ensuring that no matter what, they can keep those drug addicts addicted and on the streets, getting abused, and encouraging more bad behavior the more money you give them. And of course, that's what we've seen in Portland, that's what we've seen in Denver, that's what we've seen in various cities and states around the country, but of course on the West Coast in California and Portland and Seattle is where we decided to go down the grant grifting operations for the homeless industrial complex, really in a more industrial way, do it here first. And the failures have become so obvious and out in the open that it got the attention even of the White House. And I really think Jonathan Cho's recent story, the video that they did through the Discovery Institute, was just a good job explaining that. It's not the first one he's done, and it's not the last one he's going to end up doing, but it was one that actually did, I think, go all the way up to the White House and make an impact. So that's just a good example of how things can be impacted by some of the work that we do locally, and how it can actually make an impact all the way up at the state level like that. So I'm going to jump in and start getting to some of the questions. The one reason that I want to point out that I always say use @WeTheGoverned is that sometimes historically on some of these live streams, there's a lot of commentary that ends up happening back and forth, which is fine. And what happens though is that sometimes I'm trying to look over and look at my screen and pick out a question, and I'm trying to actually get to questions, not so much the commentary. Sometimes I'll may go a little differently, but if I can't find your question in the mix, sometimes I miss it as I'm going down. I do try to get to them in order. So no such thing as a dumb question. There's no guarantees I can answer it, but I'll do my best. And that is kind of the whole point in having a live stream Ask Me Anything video in the first place. So if you are watching this and it's not Tuesday at 5:30 or in that 5:30 window, these usually go for about an hour, a little bit longer. You can also ask me a question down in the comment section in the video description down below, below that area. I usually try to get back to those questions as well, but I won't be able to obviously answer or even know that you asked that question while we're on the air and while we're live. And hopefully if you are in Washington State and you're enjoying the weather as much as I am, probably you're outside taking advantage of this opportunity to do some of that yard work, or going for a swim, or hopefully taking your kids out for a walk, or doing something else. But I always appreciate all the people who do watch the show regularly and who put out comments as well, comments and questions. And also, I do appreciate, there's been a lot of people lately, because I've been out and about doing things. I was at the Scottish Highland Games this weekend in Enumclaw. Did run into people who recognized me there and came up and talked to me. I always appreciate that when you do. And it was fun to see all the bagpipers there, and especially the marches. If you haven't been there before, you're truly missing an unusual Pacific Northwest treat, and it is worth being there. It was really, really fun. I took some videos. In fact, on one of the videos that I recorded today, I put a little 2-minute clip at the end, the bagpipers marching across the field, and it was really pretty. It was really fun to be there in person, and you can't replicate that with a video, but at least it was a good quality video of it, and I think you'll enjoy that as well. Nice surprise, a little touch of the Pacific Northwest, and a little Scottish bagpiping there as well. So anyway, I think you might enjoy that as well when we get into some of those videos. Now, one of the topics that I kind of led with on today's live stream about Bob Ferguson's exceptionally low voter turnout, voter approval, I should say, that came out recently in a survey that's been done actually for every governor's race governor who's been in office going back at least to Lowry. I'm assuming they even did it before then, but Lowry was the last really bad governor that had such a low rating like Ferguson. And so my guess is that that's probably surprising the political insiders there. It may not surprise you and I, but I'm sure that the governor's mansion, they didn't expect such low feedback and low return, especially after signing such a bloated budget, figuring he'd paid off enough people that maybe that would improve his prospects moving forward. And it doesn't seem like that's the case, so he's probably not super happy, Ferguson, in the governor's mansion right now. And I love the fact that when they confronted him, the media confronted him, not the traditional media, of course, because they ignore it, but when the Center Square, some of these other people were bringing this up, Ferguson's primary response was to blame Trump. So that is the definition of the Ferguson administration moving forward. They will be the anti-Trump, and no matter what levels of failure or just incompetence that he displays, he's always going to blame Trump for everything moving forward. And that seems to be the way that he has set up his program here in our state. So let's get to a couple of these questions. And again, depending on how you're looking at the screen here, you'll either see the questions on the side or the place where you enter those questions in, or it might be down below. It does depend on what device you're watching this live. But feel free to go in there and put your questions in, and I will get to them here. This is a question from Karen Kyle. I live in Everett, and I was wondering if you know where to sign for the voter ID, and I'm assuming you mean the initiative. This is the initiative that was launched by the Republican Party requiring voter identification in the Washington state elections, which is generally actually popular among most people, but it's also a bit of a challenge under the current people who run our elections, because we do have a mail-in voting system, and it's a little difficult to show your identity when you're mailing stuff in remotely, and especially when you're finding secret stashes of ballots in election workers' trunks like they do in King County when necessary, or when you get a bunch of ballots out of Snohomish County that nobody ever actually ordered and somehow they come in and are valid, or they conveniently lose them in Spokane, or whatever the other problems are that we found. And voter ID is one of the approaches that we've had, of course, in trying to get the system corrected a little bit. I have a story coming up I'm anticipating next week, talking about some voter roll issues, but I don't want to give that away too much in advance, but it does seem like we've got an opportunity to make some pretty big headway, especially with the executive order coming through last month, and the fact that of course Washington State is one of the bad states that doesn't want to clean up their voter rolls, and so they're litigating over that executive order right now. But one of the opportunities that this raises for us is the Department of Homeland Security has full and total control of the databases that would expose and reveal the people who are not U.S. citizens that are here in Washington, taking advantage of the state, getting benefits and voting and registered to vote in our state. It's probably worth exposing that, and they have those databases, and they don't need state's permission to go public with them. So anyway, I think that would be an interesting story to go into. And one of the things that I mentioned here earlier was that, let me see if this is going to work here. Okay, there we go. I've lost, oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. Little technical challenges on my side here. Anyway, let's jump into these questions. So your question here, Karen, was where do you go to sign for that? And that answer I don't have, especially in Everett specifically. But I know they're widely distributing the signature sheets for that. And so you should be able to have some place on I think the GOP website, because they're the ones who have sponsored and launched this initiative initially. They should have something out there on it, and you should be able to find where those are located. But I don't have anything off the top of my head, and other than their website, I wouldn't know where to go. But you are reminding me about that issue, so I will try to do a better job when I come back for the next live stream and actually be able to talk about that. Let's see, Stephanie Lohr, I just say it's so important to share videos like Jonathan Joe. We have to continue to share the crap we live with, but good reporting is the key, and it is. And I also suspect one of the benefits would also be the fact that if you do quality work like Jonathan's been doing, and that is a Discovery Institute video that he put out too, and spend the time to do it right and get those videos out so that they're condensed enough down that they deliver the message reasonably visually in a visually impactful way, and an edited way that it comes out clean and it's easy to share and show with other people. I do think that does help get that message out there to a wider audience, as that video I think has done, and as other videos in the past. If you remember the Seattle's Dying video, I still think that when he did that video back, that was when he worked, it was a different reporter whose name I'm blanking on right now, but he did a great job with the Seattle's Dying video. And Como News that originally was associated with it. And the attacks that they had on that, because it was seen by millions of people, I mean, far more people than live in Seattle saw that video. And it really went far and wide. I actually think that's one of the videos that encouraged Bob Ferguson and the Democrat Party to try to go down the censorship sort of road and try to work with with companies to try to shut off social media or alternative media because they don't like the fact that their narrative gets challenged by people who are willing to put out stories exposing the truth and being willing to point out that the emperor has no clothes. That's one of the reasons that you'll see the political establishment in particular is most threatened. They aren't threatened by your litigations or threats of lawsuits. They aren't concerned about how much money you raise. They don't care about any of that stuff. But I'll tell you what, they are threatened by people who expose when the emperor has no clothes and that the narrative is different than the collectively approved narrative that government's pushing on you. And when these things come out and you start to expose them, there's almost nothing they won't try to do to put that genie back in the bottle if they can. And I think that they're mostly threatened by people beginning to learn just how bad or incompetent or how much failure is associated with the policies being implemented by the people who nominally are in charge. This is new to me. Flynn tracks tsunami watch issued for Puget Sound area after a magnitude 8.7 earthquake off of Russia on Como News. Could be. I have been on doing the show, so that would have to be pretty recent, and I'll have to look at that when I'm done with the show and see how serious that is. One of the things that's kind of interesting about this, if you've ever looked at some of the tsunami concerns that we've had over the years, is that you can have an earthquake clear across the Pacific or the Atlantic, if you're on the other side, that because of the way it creates either usually slides or some pressure wave, you can actually force that tsunami to go all the way across the ocean and hit on your side of the country. I think it's widely believed, I can't remember if it was the 1600s or the 1700s, that there was an earthquake off the coast of the Pacific Northwest that ended up sending a tsunami by surprise to Japan and caused great harm and destruction, and it's still evident in the historical record back there. So it wouldn't surprise me. The same thing could happen going the other way. So I'll be interested to see if they still have that tsunami watch. I don't know why it would hit Puget Sound more than it would hit the coast of Washington, which is where I would think the danger would be most significant. But we'll have to see, and I'll have to look at it. Steve Leach, will you do a review of the candidates running in the upcoming election? And the answer to that is, because a number of people have asked me about this, I can't really put one together adequately enough for the primary at this point in time, but I can do it for the general election. And I realize that the primary is where a lot of these decisions are made. This is local elections mostly, city councils, school boards, port districts, all these other positions all around the state of Washington. And you have hundreds of these positions that are up for election right now. And the primaries are occurring here this first week in August, and then the general election in November. And obviously August is where you filter out a lot of the people in the primary if you have more than two people running for office. So I'm sorry, I just couldn't get something together in time for all those races or even a sizable number of them. But I'll try to do something a little bit more specific and organized. It takes quite a bit of time to dig down into the candidates. Obviously, they aren't partisan races generally. I'll say that. They aren't theoretically, they say they're not partisan, but you can always tell if you don't know who to vote for, go to the Progressive Voters Guide and vote the opposite way that they tell you to vote. And you almost can't go wrong there. The Progressive Voters Guide they're really good at finding the worst people in our society who have managed to put their name on a ballot, and they always endorse those people. And so whoever they're running against, it's usually a better choice. Doesn't make them a conservative, liberty-loving person. It just means they're probably less destructive and corrupt than the person that the Progressive Voters Guide endorses. So that's my go-to. If I don't know any different, it's a good place to start. And they put a lot of money into that to make sure they track all these different election races. But there's also some lists around that are focused more on school board races and any of the more conservative people running for school boards, especially school boards in our state, we've been making some pretty good progress, I think, in getting in there and having an impact on some of the local school board races. But you also see some city council races where these races are pretty critical as well. Right now, if you're paying attention to lies, and I've looked into, there's a big fight going on in Yakima over their budget, for example, and where we've had a conservative majority maybe get into that city council, and now they're realizing that the bloated incompetence and stupidity of previous administrations have put an unsustainable budget together, of course. And so you're having to actually cut and downsize because all the bureaucrats really want you to do is just increase the taxes. That's what they always do. And so one of the things about it is that you want to pull back stupid expenditures, and there's an endless pile of them at every jurisdiction in Washington, and it's not always just fraud. Sometimes that's involved too, but it's other problems as well, and you can actually save a lot of money by cutting off these pointless things and reduce how much, or even eliminate the need to raise taxes in those jurisdictions. And it does start with these people running for local office, and it really does matter. Michelle Andrews at We the Governed, I saw a story stating that the president released the education funds to Washington State and others, and can you confirm and comment? I'm not sure that that's the case, actually. And there's different types of education funds, so it could be that they've released some of them. Remember, if you look across an average school district, it almost doesn't matter which one you look at. You're looking at between 8 to 9% of that district that gets funding from the feds. Most of it comes in two categories of funding. One's through the USDA, essentially for school lunches. That's actually the larger. In most school districts, that's a pretty big chunk. The other part that typically comes into the school district is for special ed, so education for kids with special needs. And so those are the two dominant funding pools of money that comes from the feds. The vast majority of money, the other 91% of it or so, comes directly from the state. And so the money coming from the state is where the lion's share of the budget's coming from. Most of that's out of property taxes, and it comes out of the general fund. That's where they run the educational dollars at the state level out of it. And so you also have some that comes from local levies that are also incurred through property taxes. The average person who has a property tax bill in Washington State, 58% of their property tax bill roughly goes to education. It can be a little different. Some jurisdictions it can be a little bit lower. It could be closer to 49% or 50%, and others it'll be a little bit higher. I think you can get up as high as 60% depending on where you live. But for the property tax portion of your bill, the vast majority of that really does go to support public education. As poorly as that money's been wasted and squandered over the last few years, and certainly not to good effect, judging from the fact that every measurable test score in Washington State's gotten worse since Chris Reichteld's been in office. But nevertheless, that's how the money flows. If the feds have decided that they're going to release those funds, they probably made a strategic decision that that was not going to be the battle that they're fighting for, because they are in several fights with Washington right now. Washington has sued the feds over a number of things. Number one, Washington State doesn't want to identify what a woman is. Washington State has the leadership has decided that having boys and girls sports to beat up on them and basically in various sports, running has been the one that's dominated the headlines because we've had state champions that were boys saying that they were girls, and so that's one of the fights that our state is having with them. The bigger fights that Washington has going on right now is probably, I think it's really over the grifting operations associated with homeless industrial complex and the giving state benefits or federal benefits, which are converted to state benefits to non-U.S. citizens in our state. So you saw the state shift $150 million into one of their Medicaid or Medicare kind of like funds, and it really is an effort to bypass the fact that the feds are trying to not provide those direct benefits, federal benefits, to non-U.S. citizens. And since Washington State's defined itself as a sanctuary state, and since 2018, the Department of Licensing has willfully and with malicious intent decided to bloat their handing out driver's licenses and registering everybody that's not a U.S. citizen to vote. although they've been doing that for decades. But after they fired the head of Department of Licensing for daring to cooperate with the feds back in 2018, it's been worse. And so the big fights really in our state are oriented financially around a couple of those key pots of money, because if the feds start cutting off funding to our state because we refuse to follow and comply with federal law on giving benefits to non-U.S. citizens and giving cash to non-U.S. citizens and paying more money into the grant grifting operations that ensure that drug addiction is only going to get worse, and the Sinaloa drug cartel and others will only get wealthier and then whatever imaginary stories that they claim to justify why the more money they get, the worse those problems become. That's where the state's going to throw its money, and they seem to be really focused on that fight more than anything else. And remember, one of the big things that we've discussed over the years, but hasn't been a topic as much lately. I mean, one of the reasons why the Democrat Party at this point in time in our state has decided that they want to attract illegal immigrants into our state and then register them to vote and get them on the programs, free food, free healthcare, free housing, all that stuff, is partially there's three levels to it. Number one, if you're running one of these grifting operations, you need more bodies, right? The more bodies you can claim that you're trying to help, the more you can justify a bigger and bigger grant next year. And since nobody audits, checks, or verifies whether you're doing a good job or not, or whether you're doing any job, or you have any metric of any kind that matters at all you're measuring is how much money you got last year and how much more money you want the next year. So number one, you keep the gravy train going for a lot of corrupt organizations that plan on making the problem far worse. And so you got to keep those constituents happy, because those are all constituents of the Democrat Party. They aren't constituents for the Republicans. Then you also have this additional bonus of the people getting them registered to vote. And the registration to vote, the Department of Licensing has been doing that for a long time, ever since Motor Voter. And but you want to register them to vote even if they don't vote, because it allows you to kind of conceal some shady stuff that might be going on in your election systems by building up this fluffy kind of crufty voter roll that allows you to have like 88% or 91% turnout in elections. And if you took away the non-U.S. citizens, it would look completely unrealistic and nobody would believe it. You also get the benefit that maybe they aren't even aware that somebody's voting on their behalf because they don't know. It lets you just flood the zone with a lot more ballots that nobody knows what's going to happen. But you also get the additional bonus, and one of the things that recently has come in the news by a New York congresswoman is the basically bloating the census data so that it gives you more political control. So if you bring in a few 100,000, say 400,000 extra non-U.S. citizens in Washington state, park them somewhere and get them on the vote rolls, or get them counted anyway in the census data, then get them counted in the census data lets you potentially get another congressional seat, depending on how you've distributed that population report through the census data. So you really get a lot of benefits. You get more money, you fund that money to a lot of your constituents, you're trying to buy a voter base of some kind, and you're getting more political power by falsifying the census data. There's a lot of benefits to supporting non-U.S., completely illegal non-U.S. citizens to come here and grift off of everything. And what do the politicians care? It's not their money. The bureaucrats don't care either. So this is why we've got some challenges when we're dealing with this subject. Sorry, I went totally off subject there. Jason, getting back to you here. Afternoon, Glenn, what's your thoughts on Oregon administratively demanding new license for corn mazes? It seems it was only stopped when the public and the governor pushed back. By the way, Washington State's done that a little bit before, too. They tried to stop the pumpkin patches. Remember Inslee got the blowback because he was trying to shut down pumpkin patches. This is just the inevitable nature of the centralized planning state. Whenever you get planners together, all they can do is just like to a hammer, everything's a nail. To a central planner, everything's an operation, a plan, a permit, a cost, a fee, a way to say no. And so whatever you want to do in life, the planners will find a way to tax it, regulate it, shut it down, and restrict it, and make sure it becomes a reward to political allies and a way to hurt political enemies. It's just the way planners think. they can't help themselves. That's the only way they think. And that's one of the reasons why if you eliminate central planning, life is better for everyone. But there's a process to do that, but you can't just overnight it exactly. But you just getting rid of these crazy people whose entire existence in life is to harm the community around them as much as they can, and of course they can justify it. Anybody can always justify it. The cat lady up in Seattle can justify claiming that you don't want the Blue Angels flying overhead, but it doesn't mean it's a good idea. And because it becomes this kind of off-the-grid political process that's no legislature actually passes a law. They just pass nebulous legislation that lets rulemaking be done by these central planners somewhere. So whether that's the Department of Ecology, whether it's central planners in your planning department, in your county or city government, whoever that delegated authority lands on them, this is where the abuse of the administrative state comes in. And so, and every now and then something goes a little too far, it gets enough attention, and they pull back. Farmers markets, trying to put farmers markets out of order. Or I remember this honey stand out in Shelton where this guy was being harassed by the planters there in Mason County a number of years ago, and I stepped in and helped him with that, and he was able to get him to stop and let him sell honey, all kinds of things like that. So those are the kind of things that we'll see. We'll see what happens. Steve Leach, what do you think the chances are of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and now British Columbia succeeding in their effort? I'm not sure which effort you're talking about. If it's the effort to join with America and become the 51st, 52nd, and 53rd states, I don't know. I'm curious to see what's really going on up there. There have been historic movements based on the Articles of Confederation that Canada had from 1867 when they first did it till now that in theory allow a little bit of flexibility with some of their provinces and being able to potentially, in theory, go down this road to join America. But I don't think that, I think it's a fairly complicated process. From an American perspective, some of those provinces are worthwhile. Certainly Alberta and Saskatchewan, because of the massive natural resources they have there, not just in energy and mining, but also in timber and other things. So, and there's a lot of cultural commonality there. Even British Columbia, for the most part, you've got a little bit of a different relationship in British Columbia. You do have a deep water port up there, which is pretty significant, but also there's heavy Chinese influence up there, and I imagine that there would be a little bit more drama associated with that, a little bigger population base. But we'll see what happens. So I don't know much about where they're going or how serious anybody is, but we live in interesting times with a lot of chaos around the world, and that's just another example of it. Jack Palder, did you see that Vancouver wants us to vote for more money for homeless daycare, also known as the local libraries? Yeah, I would not give a dime to any of your local libraries, especially in Washington State. And, one of the questions, I remember a number of years ago when Acorn was caught at the Seattle Public Library, this was 2007, creating fake voter registrations. They got caught making, about 1,500, if I remember right, that they were using the Seattle Public Library. And I remember people saying, well, who knew that the Seattle Public Library could be used for more than just shooting up meth? And so that was kind of a joke that was going on at the time. But the problem, of course, has become, especially in the urban library settings, that they clearly are becoming a focal point for supporting homeless drug operations in the community, which, of course, in turn reduces the interest of the community to use the libraries for its intended purposes. And when my kids were young, I brought them to the library. They liked Lego Story Hour. They liked a lot of the other programs that other kids liked there, too. And that became kind of a dominant. When I would go to the library, that's who I would see, either people who were unemployed or homeless, unemployed in theory, trying to apply for a job, the homeless surfing porn and shooting up in the bathrooms, and the kids in the central area. But of course, a lot of these libraries have decided to go down drag time story hour, which is not that popular for most people, nor does it impress the majority of the people who live in those communities. And the libraries have just become exceptionally ineffective, exceptionally poorly run, very wasteful with money, and very arrogant in their attitude about why they deserve to exist. And so, to some extent, as much as I am a big fan of libraries, always was, we have an almost unsolvable problem with the people who run it today. That it's not about books, it's not about education anymore. It's either weird indoctrination or esoteric sort of political focus or a justification to stay around so that they can, they don't put in weight gym or showers in there, but they're getting to the point where they might as well be putting those in for homeless folk. And so it is super expensive. We'll see what happens there. Here's back to the tsunami story, and I'll add this is not a question, but Flynn, according to Flynn here, Flynn Track, if a tsunami is generated for the West Coast, it's currently predicted to arrive in Washington at around 11:30 p.m. Tuesday. So good to know. If you were planning to camp out on the beach, this is probably not the evening to do that, especially in my opinion, if you're out at Ocean Shores or Grayland or in a place like that. It may be the evening for you to go a little bit further inland and watch the stars and camp out up on a little bit higher area. And so if you were in Hoquiam or Aberdeen, I would be aware of this. Those are the areas I'd be most concerned for. I'm not sure how a tsunami would actually migrate down into Puget Sound, but it would probably have a similar effect. So we'll just have to see. They do have tsunami stations off the coast, and so because of that warning, I'm sure they're going to be paying very close attention. But if you live in those areas, I would definitely encourage you to be at least frosty and awake and aware, and probably just prudently on higher ground tonight. Let's see. Brian B., did you see the story about the King County Council increasing the tax with no specific plan for the revenue? Yes, I did. And that is a classic case. I mean, I cannot possibly explain, or it is, I don't even know how to, you can't exaggerate the level of incompetence that exists within government and the attitude that the bureaucracy has in this sort of, it's a very self-righteous attitude that they oftentimes have about your money is really not yours. Your money is just a question of how they can take your money to justify whatever their schemes and dreams are and their plans and their operations. You never see government coming back and the bureaucracy coming back and saying, here's the things that we want to cut. Just live within our means. That's never a part of the conversation. Sometimes they'll pay it lip service if they know they need to politically say something. And if you're an elected official in a jurisdiction, and you realize you're going to be short in the budget, you will go and direct your staff typically to come up with solutions that save money. And what you'll find is there's going to be cash cows or operations within government that those bureaucrats will refuse to look at. And so they'll oftentimes pick something. There's a game they play on this, where they'll pick something that the people don't want it to. It's always in public safety, or it's going to be some nominal cost of like putting up the Christmas tree lights or something like that. So they'll focus everybody's attention on that, and the we're going to reduce public safety, or we're going to take away the Christmas lights, or something that really annoys the whole population. Everybody gets angry and they get distracted by that. Nobody's looking at all these stupid things that government's squandering its money on because the bureaucrats enjoy squandering money on those things. And so there's a number of different approaches that if you're in that situation and you're a city council or county commissioner and you're in a budget shortfall, which frankly the vast majority of jurisdictions in Washington state are probably going to hit that point because of the stupid and incompetent way the state has been run lately. So if nothing else, the state's hitting a brick wall, and so there's a bit of a ripple effect. So there's a lot of things you can cut right off the bat that you should be cutting anyway, even if you're not in a budget crisis. Stop paying for all of the memberships to things like the Association of Washington Cities, your lobbyists, your membership of the American Planning Association, all these other just squandering money, just being flushed down the drain for nothing. Look through your software licenses, the same thing. Until DOJ did that at the federal level, I hadn't really thought about it so much, but a lot of money squandered at the local level on pointless IT licenses that nobody uses. There are some things you probably need to have, but you really want to get rid of most of that and narrow it down to the bare minimum. Eliminate travel. limiting travel is really important. It's astounding how much junkets, conferences, and travel of that type is used as kind of a reward for bureaucrats who otherwise do very little anyway, and that's kind of their reward. And of course, they're always in places like Hawaii or down in San Diego, or they're at some resort, or they're in Las Vegas or Reno or someplace like that. And so cutting that out, who needs that? The other thing then is look at some of your sub-departments, and you can eliminate entire departments if you're serious about trying to fix the budget crisis that might exist in your city. The other thing is, even among some of the other, and once you get past that, now you're looking at things like programs that cost a lot of money for your city, upper level bureaucrats and administrators. That's where you want to start cutting pay cuts, voluntary pay cuts, or FTE cutting there, because what those guys are going to do is the last thing they're going to do is say, I want to cut my own salary, or I'm going to cut my position. They're going to look for worker bees to cut down here, and even though you could get rid of a pointless and duplicative bureaucrat administrator, and you would never notice. In fact, probably the city would run better if they're gone, and their equivalent budget impact is like 2 of the frontline employees who may actually be doing work that matters. So, but that's not how your manager or your city administrator, that's not the way they're going to look at the budget. They're going to try to come up with dumb cuts that distract you, or they're going to come up with cuts on public safety or politically cuts that they know that you're not going to want to do, so they force you into a corner to get what they really want, which is just another tax increase, because the last thing they want to do is actually go and make budget cuts. So, and then the King County's egregious level of stupidity and incompetence. It is a county poorly run by some of the worst administrators that we've been able to collect in Washington State and squeeze in one place. And of course, their bloat and waste and incompetence, and they benefited from the fact that we're a wealthy state with historically high net worth individuals that have moved here and started companies, a lot of entrepreneurship. Well, the state's doing a good job destroying and slowing down that growth and encouraging that growth to occur in other states. And so, of course, the government's late to the party, and they're not going to be aware of it until their tax receipts start falling off the cliff. And the last thing they really want to do is reduce the bloat. So they're going to try to push through a stupid tax, which actually further incentivizes some of the problems. Not that any of the bureaucrats care. One of the other things, of course, is it's highly worth going out and revisiting a lot of these union contracts and substantially changing how they're operated. So anyway. That's just my opinion, and I do have an opinion on that. I haven't gone through that a few other times. Randall Carr, did you see the email that Rick Larson sent to his constituents about the big, ugly bill and all the things he wanted to know, what we wanted him to fight against first? That's funny. I didn't see that, but I don't think he's individualized enough to uniquely come up with those thoughts himself. So there's probably not a big difference between the talking points that he issued and the talking points that were issued by the rest of the Democrats who are in Congress anywhere on the West Coast of the United States. They probably pretty much all put out the same email, cut and paste, a little AI help, and that's probably what they sent out to you. So I haven't seen that one, but nothing about that really surprises me. It's always funny to respond to him, of course, with the things that he doesn't want to work on. That would not surprise me. Let's see. Carlin, Hawaii, Japan, and the U.S. West Coast, yeah. Obviously, I'd be tracking the news tonight a little bit. If something hits Hawaii, it's on the way here, so it'd be worth paying attention to that. It's been a little while since we've had a full-blown tsunami warning come about, so we don't know yet that it's there, but it seems, there is a mathematical certainty if the shock wave or the pressure wave or the way that it would send that wave through the ocean to us, if it's actually real. Graphics Guru, did you hear that VP Vance pitched GOP tax and spending cuts during a factory visit in Ohio? And no, I didn't, but tell me what I need to know. I am always interested in spending cuts. There's no doubt at a federal level, good Lord, we need massive, at least another $1 trillion plus of dollars cut out of the federal government. And really, it's probably closer to about $1.5 trillion that they have to cut. The question always is where. It's always the question, and how do you implement it? Which one's the most logical rolling forward? Doge at the federal level came out recently and said that through just the cancellation of all these pointless stupid vendor contracts and other things, that they've saved $200 billion so far out of the budget, which is probably true. They've identified a lot more than what they've officially saved by doing those things. But if, a billion here and a billion there, pretty soon you start adding up to real money. And so if they can keep grinding away, if they've saved $200 billion in the first 6 months of their effort, and those are actualized changes. If some of that's also implemented at the congressional level, or because congressmen seem to not be able to ever cut the budget, at least getting it, because especially with earmarks and pork rolling and all this other stuff that they do, even the pocket rescissions that the president would be doing, which I realize is going to be a big fight over that coming up pretty soon. Anything that cuts off the squandering waste of money is super important. So anyway, I think that's a big deal. Let's see. Cucumber Road. Why are the Spokane City Council positions voted on at different dates? And the measures rolled out one by one. I'm in Spokane District 1, and the ballot only has Measure 1 for the aquifer. Okay. So probably what you see, what that means is there's a primary election that's coming up here actually next week. So it's coming up real soon. And if you have 2 or fewer people on the ballot for those positions, then they don't have a primary. That's typically what happens. And so you'll know the election's coming up, but they're just going to have one election in December and not a beauty contest in August. That's not true. They have to have a beauty contest, even if there's 2 or fewer, for things like running for the legislature sometimes. Or other positions where you have more, because there's a different statutory sort of regulatory regime that's set up around elections for those types of positions. County-wide positions, the legislature, and higher level positions. But at the local level, like school board races and others, they won't have a primary for them if there's 2 or fewer people running for office, because you're just going to have one election. So that might be what you're thinking of. Also, in a city council and school board and these off-your-election type races, they don't have the entire board up for election at the same time. They usually, Spokane City Council, I can't remember if that's 5 or 7, but that means that it'll be like 4 and 3 or 3 and 2 on when they do their elections. And so that means that you would only have 3 of them up for election this cycle, or maybe 4, depending on which part of the cycle it is. So your school board races, all the school boards actually in the state of Washington, except for Seattle, have 5 on their school board. And so that's a 3 and 2. You'll have 2 up now and then 3 later, or you'll have 3 now and 2 later, unless you've had a vacancy, in which case they'll put that in the next available election cycle. So you could have a vacancy on a board, which would add up, and you'd have more. So that's probably why in your district you're only seeing the aquifer initiative of some kind. I think that's a ballot measure 1, Prop 1 that's out there. The Thunder Designer here. And this is, there's a lot of questions now, so I'm going to start getting into these. Evening, Glenn, thoughts on the Steele dossier situation? And I'm assuming what you're really referring to there is just when the department, DNI, Gabbard basically Tulsi Gabbard released the information about the fact that what many of us already knew, but the documents that were declassified that clearly show the collusion efforts in the Obama administration to sabotage and undermine the Trump administration, Trump 1 administration, and all of the evidence that came out to support the fact that they knew that it was fake, that the Steele dossier was fake, and they decided to run with it anyway as a way to sabotage the Trump administration. It's a pretty big deal. It's a big story. One of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of attempts by the traditional media and certainly the Democrats to either downplay it, ignore it, or pretend like it's not there is it certainly doesn't fit their narrative that most of them were on the wrong side of for so long. And so they're going to really do everything they can to ignore this issue moving forward. But it's a big story and it's a big deal. And I don't think they've declassified everything yet. But as that gets more investigated, remember, this is where Washington State it was our law firm, Perkins Coie, out of Seattle, with Mark Elias, who I think was there at the time, that was used as a way to launder the campaign cash through to conceal the true source of the funding for the Steele dossier that was simply a hit piece created by the Hillary camp when they were running against Donald Trump back in 2016. What primary elections are you most excited for? Mostly I'm looking at a lot of the school board races and some different city council races around the state. I do think that what's going on in Spokane matters a lot. I do think Whatcom County has a number of races that really matter that are going on up there. King County is always a big one because you have a lot of things going on around this. It's the biggest one in the state. I can't remember. King County has like 37 cities and a lot of school board races. I'm kind of interested just at a macro level on all these different school board races because the trend over the last few election cycles for school board has generally been one that's removing some of the hardcore crazies and replacing them with people who believe math is real and they can identify what a woman is, and they actually want the kids to learn something in school and perhaps become literate. And that's very different. You don't find anybody on the left that really believes those things anymore, and so that's a cultural change that potentially can trickle up across the state and impact OSPI, which is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And with more capable people in those positions, there's quite an ability to change and turn around the self-destructive incompetence that's generally going on in most of these districts. Now, the thing you're going to have to overcome is that a lot of these school districts, as predicted when the COVID cash started coming out a number of years ago, they, of course, didn't treat it as one-time funds for one-time purposes. They just simply bloated the budget, took the COVID cash to allow the bloated budget. Now they're falling off the cliff as the COVID cash goes away. And so they're having to cut programs and downsize, and in many cases, about 10% of the school districts in the state of Washington, which is about 29, about 30 of them, give or take, that the state's having to step in and actually take over. It's the functional equivalent of bankruptcy. Marysville School District, Bellevue, a number of these school districts, Tukwila, that have hit the wall, and so they're falling off that cliff, and financially they've been mismanaged, and so they're having to step in and they being the state and try to adjust how that school district's going to be run. It's probably the largest number they've ever had happen all at once. I don't think there's anything like this in state history. So the financial slow motion kind of train wreck that's going on there is a big one. Plus you had the drop in student enrollment for parents who pulled their kids out of public school and either sent them homeschooled, which was actually not probably the majority of those kids, but a majority of them ended up that were pulled out, ended up going to private school. But you had this big change and I know it started to increase just slightly again lately, but it's a massive downsizing of the student body population. 47,000 families roughly pulled their kids out of the school system. And so now those kids, the state is reimbursing the school districts based on the number of students that actually attend. And so when that money gets changed and you've been bloating your budget with incompetence and poor financial management, it's all coming to a head at one time. So I'm quite interested in the people who are running for the school board positions and whether they are strong enough to step in there and get rid of bad superintendents and shut down some of the DEI programs and maybe recognize that boys should compete against boys and girls against girls in sports, things like that. So there's a lot going on, but that's the one I'm really watching. Let's see. Dropping right down here. Karen Kyle, what exactly are Bob's ratings? Oh, good question. So according to the article, and you can see it on the Center Square story, which published it and dug into it, it was like 30-some% of Washingtonians thought Bob Ferguson was doing a good job, which is pretty bad. And then another 50% thought he was doing a poor job or not a very good job. And then a bunch thought he was doing a really horrible job as well. I mean, that doesn't look good. Literally, you have to go back to Lowry. And I remember when Governor Lowry was, I was pretty young at the time, but when Governor Lowry was here, he was a miserable failure of a governor, like right from the first day that he started. And so he presented himself well. He spoke, or poorly, I should say. He spoke poorly. He just came across like a goofball. I still to this day can't figure out how he actually became governor. That was back in the 90s, before Locke, actually. So the fact that actually came out in this real traditional, done every cycle survey and didn't get shut down before it was published surprises me a little bit. And so now suddenly the awareness within the political establishment in Washington State, which when I say the establishment at this point in time, there is no statewide elected office holder that's a Republican, so they're all Democrats. Doesn't mean the Republicans are perfect. There's a lot of incompetent stupidity that goes on with many of the Republicans as well, but the level of egregious incompetence with how the money's being just squandered and wasted and the state's being bloated and run poorly at the state level, that is at the feet of the Democrats right now. And so I think they're starting to recognize that perhaps even in Washington State, if the public's not behind you, it's probably not going to help make things better. Let's see. Question here, Jamie Mullen. How do Washington voters get rid of all these new taxes and the property taxes that are so burdening? You will have to elect new people to office. I realize that there's an initiative process for some of this stuff, and you can try, but they've really tried to game the initiative process in a way that, and Bob Ferguson was directly involved in this, and the Democrats in particular were really involved in this because they didn't like the fact that voters in Washington always voted for tax decreases. And they didn't like the advisory votes because it showed that voters didn't like the tax increases that were imposed on them by the legislature. And so that just didn't fit the narrative that the Democrats wanted the state to have. And so by eliminating the advisory votes and then putting those statements on the ballot that skewed and confused the voters about what the tax decreases actually did, they've really gamed the system in a way that made it harder for people to vote and using the initiative process to get rid of it. So now they've really required the removal of the vast majority of these bad politicians in office. So that's going to be probably the path you have to go down. I think it starts locally to a large extent because if local governments don't impose taxes and they put that pressure and that becomes a culture at a local level, then you're able to oftentimes get some of those local elected officials start getting into the legislature, and then they can start maybe teaching somebody in Olympia that math is real and it matters, and we don't need to bloat the budget by 116% over the last 10 years, which we've done. And, well, the inflation's only got up 35%. And so as high as the inflation did get in the Biden administration, and 35% over 10 years is a lot. As bad as that is, we bloated the state budget 4 times that, or 3 times that. So that's ugly and it needs to be cut back. I would also work on downsizing a lot of the state agencies and policies and programs. Thunder Designer, Glenn, I'm curious, what 3 categories are you the most optimistic about regarding America's future? Actually, it's interesting because this is probably the first time since any of us have been alive that there's actually a discussion or a focus on actually trying to downsize the state, which is an important thing to do. I'm also optimistic about the fact that people are starting to recognize the danger of bureaucracy and the bloat of bureaucracy. Really, this has not been common in the culture to be aware of it, even probably since maybe the early 20s. It's really been a long time. And so the fact that people are waking up to that as a problem and being willing to identify as a problem, it generally means that the inevitability is that it gets addressed and fixed. Also because that'll end up resulting in downsizing the state. And if you can downsize the state enough, you can reduce the tax burden and the debt burden on the country. That cycle, if you can get going in that direction, you're good. The thing I'm most concerned about is on the other side of that coin is if we don't do that, I think the debt ends up destroying everything. Eventually, at the end of the day, the financial choices of the country ends up really affecting everybody. Now, if you can get your community locally to be run well and efficiently and effectively, you're going to be in better shape for surviving a potential downturn of some kind. But that requires a level of discipline that most people don't have. And there has been a reliance, I think, on local governance for a long time for the sugar daddy, somebody in D.C. to kick cash out to them to get by with their budget. So most county and city budgets have an element to them that they're bloated, and they're those budgets that they count on the feds to give that money in, whether it's not just the obvious stuff in transportation, but also in things like public safety, the courts, and all these other programs. If that money were to go away, there should be some kind of a plan on how you would actually still operate it as a society. So anyway, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. When you say categories, if nothing else, it's the fact that people are waking up. I think I'm also fairly optimistic and surprised a little bit about the younger generation becoming more focused, more religious than the historic generations have been in our country. Oftentimes that means that there's a general awakening that is going on out there somehow and it's fairly significant. I mean, statistically, it's probably one of the more dramatic increases of awareness of being of God or being a Christian or whatever it is, that depending on how they measure these surveys, it indicates there's at least some level of widespread awakening going on in a younger generation that the previous generations have either ignored or failed to act on or have just failed in general. And so this new generation is trying to find meaning somewhere else. And that's oftentimes going to lead to consequences of a serious and positive nature where they're going to have to come in. And if you have, if you're grounded in a belief system that believes in truth and honesty, doing the right thing, and that'll translate typically into not destroying future generations and things like that. So we will see what happens. Let's see. Question: what you make, Jason Fisher? What do you make of the hour-long Q&A session that Trump had in the UK Prime Minister? It looks like he was sitting on nails, and it covered immigration and energy. Yeah, I mean, what was interesting there is that Trump kind of does this. At least it looks to me like what he does is he'll flatter somebody, because they're being nice to him or at least being socially normal. But he also is talking about stupid and dumb policies that the United Kingdom has, Great Britain. Their immigration policy is insane. Their tax policy is destructive. Their censorship program and energy program are all terrible and horrible. And so the funny thing is, dressing him down like that is an interesting. Very few people, I think, could get away with that, and Trump seems to get away with it. And I think it has an impact in England because of how stupid, incompetent, and bad the conservative government, they call them conservative, but the words don't mean the same thing with what their policies were. And then Labour, of course, doubling down on dumb. And the fact that you have this Reform Party in England that seems to be coming out of the woodwork with a lot of strength to it. And they may actually implement the policies the way that Trump was trying to explain them to him, but we'll see what happens. Let's see. ITA. Did you hear the King County Sheriff's Office decreased staffing, and then the King County Council funded them, and they're now acting like heroes for staffing like they already were in rural King County? Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things, too, in a local governance setting, county-wide or city, public safety tends to be about 85% of your budget, depending on what your jurisdiction is. I've seen it as high as 90, and I've seen it as low as high 70s. When I say public safety, it's going to be law enforcement, jails, public defender's office, the court system, that all tends to get, prosecutor's office and stuff, that all tends to get put into public safety. For a local government, that's a logical lion's share of your budget. Unfortunately, what happens is, especially with the hostile or the narrative lately about more on the left-leaning side of the equation, where they want to take away they want to play patty cake with criminals, release them early, and create more crime, and they want to downsize law enforcement, and you kind of create this, of course, vicious cycle where you're continually re-releasing perpetual and violent criminals, completely ignoring all the 100 years of documented history plus on how to deal with public safety. And so they always find ways of supplanting the money for the sheriff's office, pulling it over here. And then, of course, when you have a financial problem, the sheriff's office may legitimately need more money, then, of course, they'll always pat themselves on the back for raising it. What you don't see them doing is cutting their budget in other stupid places. King County has an incredibly bloated, incompetent, and thoroughly corrupt planning department. They have a not very competent transportation department, which I realize is treated as a separate budget, but the way they run it is poor before, and they supplant the funding from the roads into the sheriff's office so they can divert that funding into other little schemes and dreams that the elected officials tend to run there. And so there's a lot of that just goes on. Let's see, rural King County, same person coming back, ITA. Rural King County, where the copper thieves thrive for years, and the sheriff says simply that they don't patrol out there. Probably true, and they just got their increase. Let's see if they actually start doing now. Graphics guru, Glenn, have you seen the news that Vice President Vance addressed the video showing a mob attacking a woman at the Cincinnati Jazz Festival? Yes, and I saw that video, and the video is horrible. And obviously, anytime you have mob violence like that, what was really stunning to me, beyond the stupidity and the evil that tends to be displayed when you look at mob violence, and that video clearly shows it, it's the fact that there were all these people standing around, and at least according to the sheriffs or the law enforcement out there, only one of them called 911. And that to me is stunning. The few times I've been around incidents where there's a lot of public and they're witnessing something that it isn't right. It's not usually been fights, but it's something else that happens. Usually half the people there are calling 911. And to have all these people there videotaping brutal beatdowns on individuals by the mob and none of them thinking to call 911, it's just terrible. So anyway, we'll see. The Thunder Designer, why doesn't the Western Canadian people want to make their own country, and why join the United States? Good question. I mean, one of the practical facts you're located in North America, and there's always been a divide in Canada between the Western Canadians and the Eastern Canadians, or the French Canadians especially. And so there's always been that divide. This is a cultural challenge that Canada's had for a long time. There's never really been a practical approach anybody that I've seen come up with in Canada of dividing the country into two, as much as that cultural divide would probably fit in the way that you'd have two different approaches how they'd govern. But there has been many movements in Canada, less or so on the American side, more on the Canadian side. And if you go up right now to Victoria and you there's a museum up there. I remember being there with my kids a couple years ago and going in and actually reading. It's like I don't remember what the name of this place was, but there's a house on the hill there that has like a museum in it. I remember they had a piano up there, but they had all kinds of. It was a big mansion, and it's been turned into a museum. And there's a thing about the guy that owned it, and how he was secretly running an organization up there trying to become part of America. And I can't remember what world event kind of intervened in that process, but they were thinking that it made more economic sense and practical sense for British Columbia to join with America at the time. And he was probably right. So Canada's always had, I worked up in Canada for a year, years ago, and it was an interesting experience just being with a bunch of Canadians every day and talking to them, and their obsession and attention to America and how America cares or pays no attention at all to Canada. I mean, nobody really cares what they're doing up there, but yet they're obsessed and focused on America because it really does matter to their future and their country in a way that whatever happens to Canada tends to not be noticed down below. Now, if you're in a border state like we are in Washington, it might matter to us a little bit more. And so it just seems that the movement to join America mostly has been driven by financial issues and then sometimes by cultural issues. When the Canadians were trying to take away and successfully took away a lot of the gun rights in the Western Canada, that didn't culturally mesh with what the Western Canadians wanted. When the Eastern Canadians decided to make it harder to process mines, to log, to use other natural resource industries, and pass stupid laws that were not realistic in Western Canada, those are the things that I think have generated more of a movement to potentially break away culturally. The trucker strike, I think, and the way you saw Trudeau crack down on it in such a nasty and hostile way has also generated now more of a cultural break too, plus the attacks on Christianity and religion that you also see happening up in Canada in fairly in a way I don't think they've really ever done before. This is generating a lot of cultural pushback within the Western states, especially against the Canadian government. Whether that really truly translates into some kind of movement of substance where they'd really go away. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see. Jason here, what's your thoughts on how to vote out Lisa Murkowski up in Alaska? She's a senator of Alaska. She's apparently switching to Team Democrat, and how to change the wacky system engineered to keep her in power. We got two issues there. Obviously, Murkowski is just like her dad, super corrupt politician, no belief system of any kind, truly whichever way the wind blows. I mean, remember, she lost her primary originally, and it was this scam that she was able to run through later on. I remember that because I had some friends of mine working in Alaska at the time, in the election during the primary when they bounced her out. And then for her to use the system in a way to come back later after losing, you can't do that in our state, but apparently you could in Alaska. So, and then of course they went to this ranked choice voting, which is just a scam designed to protect incumbents and make an election system almost impossible to audit and figure out what really happened. It's going to take some work. I don't know Alaska well enough to know exactly what that process would be, but it doesn't seem to be impossible. And she's such a weirdo in so many ways, and culturally not matching her state, especially the attacks that she's had lately on programs that would clearly benefit Alaska, and especially in natural resource extraction. I don't know. We'll have to see. It'd be interesting to see how it goes. ITA. Can you do some sort of guide on what government entity is the appropriate one to report complaints to? I know for lithium batteries, I would talk to the EPA, Department of Energy. Okay, so here's my answer to that question. It depends on what you're trying to file complaints about. Obviously, the lithium battery issue, which is these big battery energy generating plants, which are very expensive, potentially risky. There's other problems associated with them. I'm not trying to stand in the way of advancements in technology, but I certainly don't think these are the way that it works. If you truly have complaints, you need to focus it on the entities that actually regulate those. I don't know on those. I would say Department of Energy and EPA is probably not a bad place to go, but there's a lot of the way you draft a complaint is specific to the setting that you're in, and there's no way I can teach you how to do that exactly. I could walk you through a specific one that might apply to the situation you're in, but then the question is, how does that complaint get processed through whatever system you're going into? Most of the complaints, if you've looked at that I've done, have more to do with campaign finance law or with ethics laws, both of which are a lot easier to have. There's a very clear path on how you file the complaint, who gets it, and what they do with it. It doesn't mean they don't give the politician a pass and let them get away with murder, but at least there's a clear path for that. What you're talking about is very different, and so it just takes a different set of skills and focus on it. And they do not teach them in schools, which is what you mentioned to me as well. Jamie Mullen, how do you think the 1,100 staff layoffs at PNNL, I don't even know what PNNL is, will affect the will affect the economy in the Tri-Cities, and will it be long lasting? Okay, so you're talking about the entity that's on the base down there with the nuclear power cleanup folk and all the other stuff that's been going on there. I don't know. I mean, most people recognize the bloat of some of the government programs that have been down there, the endless sinkhole of funds that's become. It's really been a jobs program for the Tri-Cities area, obviously, for doing nuclear cleanup. And it's not that there isn't good stuff that needs to be done there, but I'm not sure that those layoffs. I think the layoffs will affect the Tri-Cities, but the Tri-Cities are a lot bigger than they were like during the Whoops plant when Whoops shut down back in the early '80s, and you had all those homes up for sale, and I had friends that lived there at the time, and it was just, they said their whole neighborhood, every house was up for sale except for theirs. Because his dad was a police officer, and I remember him just telling me how crazy it was, what was going on. I don't think you're going to have him hit 1,100 is not enough to have that kind of an impact. I see people responding on the Tsunami thing. Let's see. Graphics Guru, how massive will the tsunami hit Arizona, California? Give a guesstimate. I'm not going to give a guesstimate because actually, frankly, the last couple times I've had these, it's been zero. Nothing's happened, or it goes up a couple inches. So I don't know. I mean, they should have a pretty good handle, though, on with some of the measuring stations they have offshore. So I have to imagine they'll know a little bit before then, but we'll see. What are the chances of tsunami hitting Florida or New York City? Based on this recent earthquake, no, zero, because it's in the wrong side, wrong ocean. So no chance there. Jason Fisher, is it appropriate for OPB opposing Congress spending cuts and directing people to call their Congress critters? And the answer to that is no. This is it's the equivalent of the Office of Financial Management at the state level, and these are bureaucrats. For the budget, in theory, they're supposed to be nonpartisan bureaucrats in D.C. that are determining budget and forecasting. And historically, they've tried to remain nonpartisan, but actually that's not true now. So they clearly are. And so it's totally inappropriate for them to be involved in any kind of an effort that encourages lobbying of any kind. So it would very much surprise me if they really were doing that, or if they are, that's a good short list of people just to fire because they shouldn't be doing that. Did you hear that Trump had declared a winner of massive EU trade deal? Yeah, but I think he's saying that America did it, and everybody wins in those deals, right? So, although to be fair, I do think America got the better end of that one compared to where we were before. So I'm just curious to see if how Europe takes it in the long run. Rick, do you think there will be a recall attempt? And I'm assuming you mean on Bob Ferguson. And the answer to that is probably yes. The question just is it a serious one? We've had exceptionally unserious people, shockingly ignorant of the law and unserious about the effort, run recall campaigns in the past where they aren't serious at all. So they're just about collecting the money and making sure they fail. But it's I don't know if you get some clicks or social media things or something like that. I don't know. But it's, recall campaigns are hard. You really have to think about it. I actually think you'd have a pretty good shot at recalling at a statewide level. The best person to try to recall would be Reichdahl. You could probably do that because he's been in the same position now long in a period of time, and he's been such a floundering goofball and failures with very measurable levels of failure and bizarre behavior that's clearly unconstitutional, exhibited in a very public format, arrogantly out of stupidity and just general corruption. So I think Reichdahl would be a better chance. Ferguson, 6 months into his office, you're just going to have a hard time getting that through. You might be able to get Reichdahl through. Because remember, before you ever collect signatures, you still have to, in Washington State, get through the legal process. And so far, the Supreme Court has upheld some of these recall efforts. There's a recall effort that they've upheld a couple times in the last few months in this state, usually for local positions at a much lower level. Statewide office, it'd be interesting to see, because I don't think they've had a serious recall effort at a statewide level in a long time, but Reichdahl would be the one I would focus on if you want to be successful. If you just want to waste people's money and time and energy, then you go after Ferguson without a really good plan, because I'm going to tell you, you can't do it for less than millions of dollars, and you can't do it in a half-ass sort of way. You really have to have a serious way of working forward on that, but we'll see. Let's see. I would stay away from the shorelines until after 9 p.m. tonight or even later. That's what I would say. I would say good time not to be camping out on the beach. So if you thought you were going to go out there and go rogue out at Ocean Shores and park your van or your truck somewhere up there and live the van life on the beach, not a good night for it. Maybe try that later. But yeah, by 9 p.m. I get as far away from that beach as I could, just to be safe. And listen, it may be a nothing burger like they've been in the past, but I wouldn't want to be down there taking that chance. Graphics Guru, which group is more detrimental to the United States? Neither group is necessarily at all. I mean, at this point in time, I don't know what you're really referring to in that context. Jason Fisher, let's see. What's your bets on New York City mayor race? Will there be a lot of U-Haul rentals? Great Ridgefield business, by the way. Okay, let's see. I would guess, and this is the New York Mendami sort of race, I lived in Manhattan when I was a college student there under the David Dinkins administration. And that was a level of incompetence and stupidity and just abysmal failure that visibly was so self-evident after decades of problems in the city, admittedly, and crime rates at a level that nobody in America today even understands. I mean, you go back and you look at the FBI crime stats, which at least back then I think were pretty realistic. They weren't into the gaming that they do now a little bit. And they clearly, I mean, 2,200 people murdered within about 10 miles of my dorm room or so. That's a massive number of people murdered there. And you can downplay or modify or maybe not have reported all robberies and muggings and even rapes and things like that. But murder is hard. There's a dead body there. So it's hard to hide that. So as a statistic, that's kind of a big deal. And it was horrific. What was really more interesting to me, in hindsight, looking back on it, was the willingness of New Yorkers to put up with this horrific level of crime. But to be fair, it had built up gradually over decades. And so it hit that point in the 90s where it was just this pinnacle of failure, which is why a city that was clearly dominated by Democrats elected a Republican as mayor, simply because they had had such bad leadership there. Now, I don't know if New York wants to just destroy itself every 30 or 40 years with an abysmal descent into chaos, and then come back by electing somebody like a Giuliani in his heyday, whoever that new person will be, because Mendami looks like he's kind of on a path to win. If he doesn't win, that's going to be a surprise to me. But he's going to just trash that city. And I would guess especially if you're kind of a middle-class person there, you don't think you can bribe your way through this guy, you're probably getting out of Dodge if he wins, more than normal even, more than I would normally expect. And people are worried because they don't want to stay there too long, because the property values are going to obviously plummet once that guy gets in there. So we'll see. More detailed reports on the tsunami about projected arrival times. La Push at 11:35, Nia Bay at 11:40, Tacoma at 2 a.m. That's interesting. So if there's a tsunami, it's a very potential tsunami setting because nobody really knows. We should see if, I don't know when it was going to hit Hawaii, but we should see if it hits Hawaii first. So anyway, we'll see what happens. President of the United States, Donald Trump, put tariffs on many things and claims that American people will get rich so far for naught. What's your thoughts that already high inflation, then imposed tariffs, same time, no work? Well, one of the things I've not been a fan of tariffs historically. But you do have to have reciprocal trade with countries. You can't have countries take advantage of you, so you have no tariffs and they impose massive tariffs. Obviously, at some point in time, you want to balance it out. I have been surprised that we haven't had more inflation. I think everybody who is familiar with how the system works would have anticipated a higher level of inflation now than what we've had. Remember, most of the inflation that we've experienced that came out of the Biden administration. It's been the highest inflation since the 70s, and that had nothing to do with tariffs at the time. So we'll have to see. I don't think you can retain high tariffs for a long time and not have that creep into the cost of goods, regardless of whether in the short term a lot of these companies are absorbing the costs. Like the Japanese car automotive companies have obviously been absorbing the costs lately, and so have others, but we'll have to see how it goes. Thunder Designer, why did Trump endorse Vivek? If Trump wants to pause immigration, why does he endorse a guy who will do the opposite? Because people are more than just one position. And Vivek came out, and Trump, I think, is pretty loyal to people who come out and support him. And they may disagree a little bit on this. I don't think Vivek is so much opposed to immigration as he wants legal immigration in a more organized and structured path, but that's not something I've done a lot of research on, so we'll have to see. Let's see. What happened to Fighting 101? Grundle said this. I think you're referring to the video out of Cincinnati, which has gone viral, of course. Let's see. And yes, I agree with you here about watching, having people just watch it and not report it is very strange. And Karen throwing in a comment here just about Canada, about Ontario unfairly taxing Alberta, Saskatchewan, of course, and they are tired of it. I don't know how much it affects British Columbia because Vancouver's kind of a cesspool up there as well, of bad governance, but certainly Saskatchewan and Alberta are directly affected by it. Jason Fisher, why does Washington, Connecticut, and Illinois not allow you to buy strip lower receivers? Well, California can, but Colorado mandates fixed magazines. Because you've got a hodgepodge of approach by gun grabbers all over the state that have decided, all over the country, that each have their own little scheme and plan that they're trying to implement. And a lot of this is throwing everything up at the wall and see what happens to it. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. ITA, thanks, Glenn. You're coming back to me on this, and you said you wrote a complaint to the Department of Justice and haven't heard back yet. And, listen, put yourself in their shoes. Number one, we don't have, and this has been a problem across the country, and one of the reasons why I think the Senate needs to go into recess is that we need recess appointments because the senators, as in a variety of states, and the Senate in general has decided not to approve, with just a few exceptions, any of the attorney generals, state-appointed district attorneys that they would use in the DOJ's office, right? None of them have been appointed. And so what happens is you have interim people in there who aren't going to take chances or push hard. That's a problem right now. Let's see. Hi, Glenn. Eric Vasquez, any thoughts on the race for mayor in Tacoma? Most candidates seem like loony lefties. Also, any updates on the U.S. attorney selection for Western Washington? Sort of related to what I just said. It hasn't been chosen. We have an interim attorney for Washington and Spokane, which are the two Department of Justice divisions in our state. So nobody's there. I haven't paid attention to the Tacoma race. I'm sorry. I'm just not aware of who's running there. So we'll have to see who comes out of the mix. It's not a surprise that most of them are going to be crazy lefty loons. I'm sorry because that's not a good thing, but that's generally how it's happened. KC, Fun Life. KC1, Fun Life. We the Governed. G-O-V-E-R. Oh, you didn't have an N-E-D, which is why it didn't show up there. What are your thoughts on Ferguson being a single-term governor, or what would have to happen for his ratings to go up? I think Ferguson could be a one-term governor, but that still requires you to run a legitimate candidate who isn't an amateur out of nowhere, who's got an established history and name recognition and the ability to fundraise. If you can't pull in $20 million for a race for governor, please don't run because you're not serious. There's just no other way to do it. You need to be able to market yourself. And it's hard. I mean, it takes an unbelievable amount of time and money to distribute knowledge and information to a broad section of the community. And you're not going to make up for that with a social media post or a viral video here and there. It really does take a lot of work, and a lot of money. There's no simple way of getting past that. You could have things that have improved your name recognition perhaps ahead of time, but I think it's very difficult for people to realize what it takes to get 2 million votes. And it's not an easy path. It takes a lot of work to get out there. Let's see. We got the story here about 13-foot tsunami hit Russia already. It'll probably just be choppy in the sound overnight. It might be. That's right. I don't know. We'll see. I just wouldn't be camping on the beach to take a chance. But then again, you can do what you want. Paul Heinrich, 5 Virginia school districts have been found guilty in Title IX violation investigations. Any hope for Washington to be investigated? And the answer is probably yes, and we'll just have to see. Paul T., do you think the last recall attempt was a false flag? And the answer to that is no. I just think it was an unserious effort made by unserious people without really thinking that they would get as much attention as they ended up, and the money got wasted in an effort that was never that serious all along. And I wish that wasn't the case, but I think it was. Let's see. Jamie, I kind of agree on this. I'm bouncing down to some of these last questions, and I realize I've been doing this for a while, so I'm going to probably have to wrap this up here. But small nuclear power plants actually could do a much better job in Washington for powering everything. Anyway, it seems like it would be fairly easy to do it without batteries. The battery approach is inefficient and a bad use of resources, I think. Nuclear energy makes sense to me. Hydropower is a pretty efficient baseload power. Lithium is just stupid and dumb, and it's a big waste of time and energy and a risk in other ways. I don't think that's very good. Let's see. Graphics Guru, what is that fiery logo behind you? Well, you can kind of see it better here. It's just, so there's a light up here that shine, and if you change the little thing in the front of it, so I changed some different things over time. And if you've watched my video over the years, you've seen this change quite a bit in the back. And that was just me trying something different today. I recorded 2 videos today, which will be launched, hopefully one tomorrow and one a little bit later. And one of them's about Enact Blue and FEC investigation work, including some work that's been done by a lot of volunteers in Washington State. So just kind of continuing down that story and exposing some of the money laundering indications that are going along with that investigation. Also, the second one is about part of what we've had a lot of discussion tonight about with Bob Ferguson's low approval ratings, what's driving it. And I didn't really answer one of the other questions that came up earlier about the fact that Ferguson would have to change who he is in order to raise that profile. So I don't think he's going to be able to prevail in the end by just being the anti-Donald Trump. That's a very weak sauce sort of presentation, as much as I know a lot of lefties and Dems have it in our state right now, and a lot of people are suffering from Trump Derangement Syndrome. It just doesn't seem like an effective way. I think most people get tired of it after a while. All right, guys, with that, I think I've gone way past my time that I normally would for a live stream on a Tuesday. Just remember, next week, I'm probably going to be doing this on a Wednesday. Thank you guys for sticking with me. Obviously, there was a lot more questions, and I know I missed a few questions here towards the end, but I couldn't get to all of them. So hope all's well. I hope you enjoy these next 2 videos. And feel free to share this channel with others. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. But I'm just trying to let people know, the more that it does get subscribed, the wider an audience it seems to have over time. And the whole point of doing this is to try to influence people and hopefully improve our state. So the more people that see it, the better off it is. And if I saw you this weekend at the Highland Festival and Games out in Enumclaw, thank you for coming up and saying hi. I always appreciate talking to people in person. I prefer that rather than talking to a camera. But for those of you who couldn't be there, this is the next best thing, I suppose. And hopefully by next time, I'll have some more updated Doge Washington training classes coming up and some other speaking engagements that I can start putting on your calendar if they happen to be near you and it's convenient, and you want to come and actually see if I'm the same person that you see up on stage or at an event as you see here sitting in the studio in front of you. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and there's going to be a lot more to talk about later. And just remember, the future does belong to those who show up, but you got to be willing to get out there and do something to try to make an impact to do that. So hope all is well, and we'll see you next week.